Hi, everybody. In this lesson, we are actually going to talk about different types of fractions. So there are obviously many types of fractions. We've talked about equivalent and reduced. You can see my video on those after this video, but there are many different types of fractions in this world. And we are most familiar with, here's a picture, and I'm shading in one part of this, and this is 1 over 2. We're also familiar with other fractions like 3 over 4, just to give you some examples, 8 over 9, and so on. And these are called proper fractions. Now, proper fractions are very well liked. They are the most common, and when we are solving math problems, specifically if you're in my class, we always want our final answer to have proper fractions. Proper and reduced, again, if you're not sure what reduced means, please go ahead and watch my video lesson on reduced and equivalent fractions. But that doesn't mean that these are the only types of fractions, that exist. For example, what happens if, you were to draw or you were given a pizza? Let's talk about pizza. But you're also given a piece of the pizza. So you don't just have a whole pizza, you have a whole pizza and you have a slice as well of pizza. So this here is one whole pizza, but this here is a part of a pizza. So it exists where you can have 1.5 pizzas, say. Now, is this a fraction? I know that you're probably wondering, well, this isn't, but this is. This is usually the common answer I get. But no, in fact, this whole thing here represents a fraction. It represents a fraction where I have some of it, which is a whole, and part of it, which is in your typical fraction form, let's say. So when you're given something like this here, we call this a mixed fraction. Mixed because you're given a whole and something that represents a part, but we will call this a fraction. Even though wholes are also fractions, but that's another lesson. So that's a mixed fraction. Now, sometimes though, especially when it comes to multiplying and dividing fractions, a mixed fraction might not be good for you. You might want to make this mixed fraction look like, not a whole and a fraction, but just one whole fraction. And to give you an example, I might ask if maybe in your lives you've either gotten or have seen that on a test you may have gotten a bonus point. And because of that, you're really happy because not only did you get 20 on 20, but with that bonus mark, you actually got 21 on 20. And if you were to do the math on that, say, let's do that very quickly. So if I were to do the math on that, that would actually be 105%. So over 100%. And you're probably wondering, well, that's very uncommon. Is this even correct? Well, it is correct. And I know that it's hard for people to see because the numerator, right, this is called the numerator, is bigger than the denominator, which is very strange because if you see the proper fractions I have given you up here, the numerator was always smaller than the denominator, and that's usually the most common one, right? It's proper. But these still exist, and we actually call them improper fractions when the numerator is bigger than the denominator. Now, improper fractions and mixed fractions that you see here on the screen actually go together because if you don't want a mixed fraction for the purpose of, say, multiplying and dividing, you want to change it into a fraction without a whole, which means that you are just going to change it into an improper fraction. So that's the whole point of changing of mixed fractions and improper fractions. They're actually the same thing. So how do we do this, which will be my next slide? Basically what you're going to be given is you're going to be given a mixed fraction, something that looks like 2 and say 3/4. And again, for the purpose of say multiplying and dividing fractions, you might not want it to look like that. You might want it to look like a regular fraction where you have something on the top and something on the bottom. So it's very easy. there's just a few steps. You first, and I'll write them out here, you need to multiply the whole by the denominator. So it's very important that you know what these words mean because you need to make sure that you're multiplying the right things. So you're going to multiply the whole by the denominator. And in this case, it's going to be 2 times 4, which is 8. But in addition to that, you also are going to need to kind of circle on up and add the numerator to the product that you just got in the first step. I'm going to say to the product from number 1. So that means you're going to have to do 8 plus the numerator in our case is 3. So that gives us the answer of 11. Now, where does this 11 go? This 11 actually becomes the new numerator. And we're going to put it right smack dab up here. 11. And what's in the denominator? I'm going to write here, denominator never changes. Denominator never changes, which means that the denominator in our mixed fraction here, and I'm actually going to label it so that you remember this is a mixed fraction. The denominator in this mixed fraction is actually 4, and that's just not going to change. So I'm going to keep it in purple, and I'm also going to highlight it for you as well. 11 over 4 is our improper fraction. So if you're given a mixed fraction and for whatever reason you need to change it into improper fraction, this is what you do. But in the same way, and I'm going to kind of draw a line here so that we kind of see the other one and do the other one here. What happens if you're going from improper, I still have it in black, but that's okay, to mixed? Because in my class anyways, final answers are more than often correct if they are mixed. We don't often enjoy or like seeing a improper fraction not reduced even as a final answer. So what happens? Well, let's go with the example that I just gave you. So we were given an improper fraction of 11 over 4. Now what happens if I wanted to go from this back to the way that I started? How do you do that? So I want to remind you of a few things that I've mentioned in previous videos, where this line here is called a divisor. There is division going on when we're dealing with fractions. Now, in order for you to change, though, from mixed, from improper to mixed, remember that you're always going to need a whole and then the fraction, right? You're always going to have the whole and then the fraction. So it kind of looks something like this. So let's first look at the whole. So when you're looking at the improper fraction, you need to ask yourselves, okay, how many times does this 4 go into 11? Or what is 11 divided by 4? It's the same thing. So just for fun, we can do some very quick, long, short division here. How many times does 4 go into 11? 4 wholes go into 11 completely. So if I were to be given, like 11 things, and I have groups of 4, how many groups of 4 will go into this 11? Well, 4 goes into 11 2 whole times. And if you would do this long division wise, you would do 4 times 2, which gives you 8. And then you would subtract the 11 from the 8 to figure out how much is left over. What is the remainder? And 11 minus 8 is 3. And this is called the remainder or the leftover, whatever your school teaches you. So what does this do? So let's color code for a second here. We know the whole is 2. 4 went into 11. 4 went into 11 2 whole times. Now, what is this remainder? This remainder is actually going to be our new numerator. And like in this example here, the denominator never changes, which tells us that if the denominator here was a 4, then the denominator here is also going to be a 4. So then let's recap. So we did 11 divided by 4, or how many times 4 goes into 11, and it went into 11 2 whole times. Then we figured out that if it goes into whole times, it only goes in with 8. So we have a remainder of 3 over the denominator, which never changes, which is 4. And that's actually what we had over here, right? This is what we had to start. So these are equivalent fractions, but of course one is improper and one is mixed. And that's essentially how you change from improper to mixed, but also from mixed to improper. And always remember, just to close it out, your final answers, again, if you're in my class, definitely, maybe in other classes as well, must always be, I'm just going to say must never be improper. So we like mixed and proper fractions, and always reduce. In this case, our 3/4 is already reduced, but if you want an example, you could technically be given something like 3 6/12. If you want to reduce that, it's just 3 1/2, right? So don't forget that you can always reduce fractions. And that is your intro to proper fractions, improper fractions, and mixed fractions.